Today we're going to be working on our little Ford 4000 tractor. It's built in 1963. It's my little workhorse of a tractor. It's got the loader on it. It's got forks set up for loading and unloading stuff. Pallets just there so load things like a lawnmower or something else around. But anyway, this is a great tractor. I've had it for a few years. Starts every time. We clear snow with it. We do a lot of things with it. But we've got a problem in here in the steering box area. As you can see, the right here, there's a leak right in there around the steering box. This does have power steering. And I thought for a period of time it was in the power steering, but actually it's right there on the other side of this arm, this main steering arm. There's one of these on each side, and there's a big felt washer fits in there, and you can see where it's supposed to be. Now, we had this off earlier in the week to see what all we needed, and we ended up finding we needed that big felt washer, so we ordered one of those and a special puller. We had a heck of a time pulling that. We ended up using one of Harbor Freight's odd looking pullers. I'll try to take a picture of that later and show what that looks like. So we'll try to get a video of this so people who have these older Ford tractors, these are about the same all the way clear back into the 50s. Some of the 600s, your Gold Jubilees, those tractors. There are a lot alike in here. But anyway, we'll start working on it and get a clip of each little part. Alright, first thing we're going to do is remove this tie rod joint down here. Help it get out of a bind. As you can see, there is a nut on there with a Carter pin. So we're going to remove those two items and then knock this tie rod off. After getting the Carter key and the nut out of there, you need to use a pickle fork. Now, this is actually one that's for an air hammer, but my air hammer ain't much good, so I use the old-fashioned type of hammer and knock it off. If you don't have a pickle fork, you can always get just a hand-operated one, and a lot of parts stores will loan you one for doing this type of work. So anyway, we'll knock that off, show you what it looks like when it's gone. Now, we do have that apart. We took it apart. It kind of messed up the old rubber on that joint, but you know, that's kind of the way it goes when you're dealing with a 50-year-old tractor. But what I did was drilled and tapped on this back side with a and put a Zerk there, so that we had a Zerk there to grease it, and that, you know, if we grease it regular, it should keep the dirt and everything out of there, and it should last for quite a while longer. Alright, the next deal is to pull this big old nut off of here. Now, that nut is 1.25 inches, and I don't have an 1.25 inch impact. I do have a big 3/4 set, but the impact seems to take the impact wrench better. But what I do have in my collection of odds and end tools is a 32mm deep socket, and it fits on there just fine. Does a good job of knocking her off. And here we go with the 32mm and our little 1/2 inch DeWalt. This was off the other day, so it's gonna, hopefully it'll come off fairly easy. If not, you may have to find a cheater bar and a breaker bar and just anything you can to get that baby off there. But she came off because she'd been off before. And then I put some dope over the threads and the shaft to help make it easier to come off later. Now, when I first pulled that arm off, I had quite a time doing it. I tried several different gear pullers I had. I ended up using this little setup. This is a 14-piece gear puller set from Harbor Freight, and it's done a pretty good job. While I was trying it, I tried the old bearing puller with it that actually bolts around it, and I busted one of the arms on that. But this little deal did a good job of pulling that off. I had to situate things just right to get it centered and everything, but anyway, but since then I've picked up something else. You can see the two arms and how they clipped up underneath the back side of that bracket. Since pulling that other, and I purchased this little, what they call a mechanical puller. It's set up more for this type of work, steering arms and different things like that. It's I got it through Zero Tools. It's a great little puller as far as heftiness and everything else. I haven't tried it yet. We'll see how great I think about it in a few minutes. It takes a 7/8 inch nut to drive that in. It's easier than trying to, looks like it'll be easier than trying to hold those two jaws together on that other puller. The reason I know that's a 7/8, here's a 7/8 socket, but here's a little tool that's one of the best things I use, and it saves me from walking back and forth to the toolbox. It's just a cheap pair of plastic calipers, but you can measure your nut head or your bolt head or whatever, or the diameter, both width and length and everything else of a bolt or a nut, and you got a good idea of what you got. You don't have to keep running back and forth to the toolbox to get a socket that'll fit. In this day and age, it's kind of hard to tell what size of things are. With sometimes you run into metric, sometimes you run into SAE. It's just a little bit easier if you measure it, measure the nut, and then go from there. I'd recommend as one of the best shortcuts you can have for doing stuff with. I use it a lot, and it's very handy. If I can't find it, I really miss it too. Okay, I got this new gear puller, mechanical puller, on the steering sector arm. Getting ready to try it. Turn it off. First, I've got it on there. It's up against the bolt, centered on the bolt. The steering sector bolt. I always put a little oil on a puller. Makes it go a little easier. We'll use the impact here. Got a little extension on it. See what happens as we go along here. Battery operated impact's not going to pull it, so we're going to get the big unit out here in a minute. Make sure it's centered there. Alright, may not be able to show this next step, handle the big impact with it. Well, as it turned out, I took the extension off of the little battery operated 1/2 inch drill, and boy, it just zapped it right off with that brand new puller. It's sitting down there. But there's the arm off. There's the splined shaft, and this is the fat little washer, felt washer, that goes back on the shaft. So we'll slide it on there. And it's kind of a tough fit, but we'll push her on there, and then we'll start the arm back on there. One thing to be aware of, there's splines on this, but then there's like 4 big splines. Now, if you can see that bigger spline on the top, the wider spline, that's, you want to make sure your arm has the same situation there when you line it up, and then it lines up with this arm down here when you're all ready to go back together. Okay, we got this side all back together. I've got the tie rod end in. You can see there's a Carter key in it. Make sure you bend it a little bit on the other side. But you can see right here where the new felt seal goes on that steering shaft there. And up against the deal, there's nothing else much under there. That little felt helps keep the grease in there. Well, we're on this side. I've still got the other side to do, but right there you can see a Zerk, and if you look at it, there's a pipe plug right there. And Ford recommended Ott grease. That's what they called it. And I don't know, that must have been just a lubricant. Reading on the internet, different people said pull that pipe plug out of there. That's where you fill it. And find you an adapter, a 3/8 inch adapter down to an 1/8 inch that you can screw a Zerk in, and then just fill it full of grease. It took almost a tube and a half of grease in there. I just used a good lithium grease, and that's what others had recommended. And you know, this is pretty cheap. These are $2 for those seals. Cost about $5 to ship them, but for a little under $10 you don't lose a gearbox. You lose that gearbox, you're talking about big bucks, either for the parts or everything else. But anyway, here's the shaft on the other side we've got to do. You can see how bad that felt seal is and how cruddy it is, and it's basically the same. You do the same thing that you did on this side, and basically that's about it. We'll start tearing that apart here in a minute. Imagine this side will be a little tougher because that other side was already on taking it apart a few days ago, so it was already loose.